In the opening days of World War I, the British government published this official export ban. At the top, the list follows a predictable logic. Military hardware like aeroplanes and gunpowder are strictly locked down to keep them out of enemy hands. But as you read further, the priorities look different. Alongside the weapons, they banned the export of mundane everyday goods: cotton waste, olive oil, silk noils. These were basic commodities usually found in kitchen cupboards or textile warehouses. By restricting these items, the government essentially froze the global movement of basic civilian trade, cutting off international supply routes in a single day. For over a century, wars were largely fought by soldiers on distant battlefields, while the economy hummed along at home. This document suggests the distinction between the front lines and the marketplace was beginning to disappear. When we examine these items individually, they reveal a massive reorganization of national resources, one where a simple sack of cotton was becoming as essential to the war effort as a rifle. Standard black powder was reaching its technical limits. The chemical entries on this list represent a transition toward complex, laboratory-managed reactions that would define the next generation of weaponry. Near the bottom sits an entry for toluol. While it sounds like a common industrial solvent, in a wartime economy, it was one of the most valuable liquids on Earth. Toluol is the precursor for TNT. By treating a toluene ring with nitric acid, factories transformed an industrial byproduct into a high explosive. The cotton waste listed here was destined for a similar process. Soaked in acid, cotton becomes gun cotton, a far more powerful charge. Once the chemistry was perfected, the mass production of these shells required a constant, high-volume flow of raw ingredients, turning the British factory floor into an extension of the battlefield. Success in this new kind of conflict depended as much on the yield of a chemical plant as it did on the bravery of the infantry. The document also captures a moment of technological tension. You can see petroleum and motor spirit listed right next to draft horses and pack animals. Logistics in 1914 still relied heavily on the muscles of millions of horses to move artillery and supplies across the mud. Yet those animals shared the landscape with fuel-hungry airships and early motor vehicles, demanding a completely new and unproven supply chain for refined oil. This list maps the violent shift from biological power to petroleum-fueled machines, catching the military in the middle of a messy transformation. Some of the entries, like silk cloth and copper ore, appear to have little connection to the front line. However, silk had a highly specific military use. Unlike other textiles, it burns away completely, leaving no smoldering residue. This made it the perfect material for powder bags, ensuring no lingering sparks would prematurely detonate the next shell loaded into a hot artillery barrel. Copper and lead were needed for more than just rifle bullets. They were the raw materials for a vast electrical system required to command an army spread across hundreds of miles. Coordinating artillery fire and troop movements required thousands of miles of copper wire, linking trenches to central command hubs via complex field switchboards. In this era, hoarding these mundane materials of civilian life became as critical to a nation's survival as stockpiling the rifles themselves. A quiet footnote at the bottom reveals the list was already expanding, noting that drugs and other chemicals were being added daily. This strategy introduced the concept of the economic weapon. Military planners realized that starving an enemy's factories by blocking raw materials was just as lethal as defeating their armies in the field. This export ban codified a world where the front lines included domestic textile mills, copper mines, and chemistry labs. This realization permanently altered how nations interact, creating a world where global supply chains are considered critical vulnerabilities. Modern empires may fight with advanced machines, but victory ultimately belongs to those who control the raw ingredients.